the Buddha's radical secret to getting your selfie. When we first started the monastery, Ajaan Suwat said something that really captured my attention. He said, "We're not here to get anyone else. We're here to get ourselves. If other people like the way we're practicing, they're welcome to come. But if they want to practice some other way, they can go someplace else." His was an attitude that Ajahn Fuang shared. In fact, this was common with all the really great Ajahns, that you take the Dhamma and the Vinaya as your guide, and you don't let people's opinions pull you away from that. This relates to a couple of themes that Ajaan Suwat said Ajahn Mun would talk about quite a lot. One was the theme of the customs of the noble ones. Ajahn Mun, as he was practicing out in the forest, was criticized many times. We tend to think of the forest tradition as being very, very Thai. But he was attacked for not doing things the Thai way, not doing things the Lao way. The way he wore his robes, the way he ate, the way he stuck by the ascetic practices, was very different from what was common back in those days, and he got a lot of flack. And his response was always, if you want to attain the noble attainments, you have to follow the customs of the noble ones, not the customs of the Thais, not the customs of the Laos, or any customs of the world aside from those of the noble ones, because everybody else's customs are the customs of people with defilement. If you follow their customs, you're not going to get out. The customs of the noble ones are designed to get you out. This was a reference to two passages in the tradition. One is in the canon, the other is in the commentary. In the commentary, it refers to a story where the Buddha comes back home for the first time after his awakening. The very first morning, he goes out for alms. This upsets his father. No one in the Sakyan family has ever gone out for alms like that, and he thinks it's disgraceful. So he tells his son to stop. The Buddha's response is that he doesn't belong to the Sakyan tradition anymore. He belongs to the traditions of the noble ones, and one of their traditions is to go for alms. There's nothing disgraceful about it. It's a way of developing a sense of detachment toward your food, a willingness to eat whatever you get, so it helps scrub away some of the defilements of the mind. The other reference to the customs of the noble ones is in the canon, where the Buddha talks about 4 traditions of the noble ones. We chanted every now and then, "You're content with any old robe cloth at all, any old food, shelter. Whatever you get in terms of those things, you're content with it. But at the same time, you don't exalt yourself over the fact that you're content." You see that sometimes, people who puff themselves up over how little they can get along with. Instead, you use these requisites realizing that there are some dangers in the attitudes that you can develop around them. So you're alert to those dangers and you do what you can to avoid them. You don't exalt yourself as being better than other people in that area. The 4th tradition you might think would have to do with the 4th requisite, which is medicine, but it doesn't. It has to do with taking delight in developing and delight in abandoning. This relates to the Buddha's statement that discontent with skillful qualities was the secret to his awakening. In other words, contentment is not a blanket principle of putting up with whatever comes by, both outside and inside. With things outside, you learn how to adapt. If it's good enough to practice, it's good enough. With things inside though, if anything unskillful comes up in the mind, you have to delight in abandoning it. As for skillful things that are not there yet, you delight in trying to give rise to them and developing them even further. This is not usually where we take our delight. We tend to delight in our unskillful qualities. They've been our companions, as the Buddha said, for a long, long time. But you've got to realize that they're untrustworthy friends. They're not really friends at all. They're the type of friends who try to get you to break the law, and then when you do, they go running off. You're the one left with the punishment. So if you see there's something unskillful in the mind, you don't just sit there and be content with it. You may have to sit for a while to watch it, but the purpose of watching is to understand what's causing it, where it's coming from, why you go for it, what its allure is. When you really see the allure and can compare that with the drawbacks, you see it's not worth it. That's when you let it go. So those are the customs of the noble ones. The other principle that Ajaan Mun liked to teach about was practicing the Dharma in accordance with the Dhamma. In other words, you don't practice it in line with the customs of your day and age. You don't practice it in line with your defilements. You practice for the sake of giving rise to disenchantment. Years back, I did a book on Buddhist romanticism. The purpose of the book was to look at the Western tradition from the point of view of the Buddhist tradition. And one of the strange criticisms I got was, why can't we have a book that criticizes Buddhism from the point of view of the West? Well, we have all too much of that. You open up books, newspapers, and magazines having to do with Buddhism, and all they can talk about is how Buddhism has to adapt to the West. They go back and look at the tradition of adaptation through the centuries and say, see, isn't that a good thing? Yet they've never really made the case that it really was a good thing. They just take it as a given. But just because people have been adapting Buddhism for centuries doesn't mean that their adaptations were good. Their adaptations may have survived, but in the area of the Dhamma, that's not enough to prove that they really were good. Horrible plants can survive in horrible environments. We have to remember that the Buddha was the best authority on awakening and on how it can be found. So it behooves us to be skeptical about our ideas about awakening and our ideas about how it can be found, and not use them as a standard. We should try to use his as a standard and see if ours measure up. See if we can develop some disenchantment toward our old ideas, the ones we hold on to. That's when we know that we're practicing the Dhamma in accordance with the Dhamma. When our cherished ideas can get called into question. That way, we can raise ourselves up to the level where we're worthy of the Dhamma. People in the West tend to regard the Dhamma as a commodity, and as with any commodity, it's the customer who's the final judge. But what if it were the other way around? The Buddha's offering something for free, so it's not a commodity. And the question is, are we up to it? Are we worthy of it? If you can hold the Dhamma as your guide, as your standard of measurement, and do what you can to lift yourself to that, that's when you get the most use out of the practice. That's what it means to get yourself. When you're trying to get other people, there's always the question, well, why do you want other people? What do you want out of them? But when you're trying to get yourself, you look at the fact that you're suffering, and someplace in the mind is that desire to stop suffering. When you're honest with yourself, you realize that the really heavy suffering is the suffering you impose on yourself. So the work has to be done right here. You have to get yourself, in other words, pin down where it is that you're lying to yourself or deceiving yourself or letting yourself down, and get the mind trained to a point where it's not doing that anymore. That was Ajaan Suwat's intention in setting up this monastery to begin with. We try to maintain it, and it's something we maintain every day as best we can. He didn't have to gain anything from us. This was a pure gift. It was late in his life. He was already 70 when we were starting the place. He was able to get himself as we built the monastery, but in so doing, he left a lot for us. So it's not selfish, as he would say, to get yourself. If you really do, there's a lot of good that you can leave behind for other people who want to get themselves in the same way. Ajaan Suwat's gift. The Thai phrase, "don't be selfish," literally means don't look after yourself, as opposed to looking after the common good. Ajaan Suwat always questioned that phrase, because after all, who else are you going to look after? You've got to look after yourself. In fact, you're the person you have to look after more than anybody else. But that's not telling you to be selfish. It's saying that you have to look after yourself wisely, which means that you develop good qualities of mind, such as generosity and virtue, that actually help other people too. But you do have to look after yourself, because nobody else can do it for you. As the Buddha said, when you get yourself as a refuge, you get a refuge that's hard to find. If you don't have that refuge, he said, who else could your refuge be? Or as Ajaan Suwat put it another time, we each have one person in the world, i.e. Avati, the one person we're responsible for, and that person is us. We're responsible for our thoughts, our words, our deeds. We can't be responsible for anybody else's. Yet all too often, that's what we're concerned about. We want to stop somebody else from doing this or encourage them to do that without turning around to look, well, are we doing what's right? This is why we train our minds, because our actions come from here. This is the area for which we are responsible. We develop qualities like mindfulness, ardency, and alertness, so that we can see what we're doing and recognize whether what we're doing is right or wrong. And then we have the strength to admit a mistake and do what we can not to repeat the mistake. In other words, if something we like doing is going to give bad results, we have to figure out ways to prevent ourselves from doing it. If something we don't like doing is going to give good results, we have to talk ourselves into doing that. A large part of the wisdom of ardency is right there. Ajaan Suwat was once asked why Buddhism didn't have a god. If only Buddhism had a god, the person said, it would give people a sense of reassurance that there was somebody out there looking out for them when they couldn't quite make it on their own. Ajaan Suwat's response was, if there was some god who could ordain that if, when I took a mouthful of food, everybody in the world would get full, I would bow down to that god. But we're not connected that way. For all that they say about our being interconnected, the interconnections are actually a cause of suffering. We're interconnected to people who can do a lot of harm. We're interconnected to a world that can snuff us out very easily. All we need is an earthquake or a tsunami. It's as if the earth is shrugging a little bit and thousands of people can die. So it's not the case that this interconnected system is designed for the well-being of everybody. It eats everybody up, and everybody else is eating everybody up too. So our best contribution to the interconnected system is to get out and to be a good example to others in getting out. It's not that we don't hope for other people to find the way out as well. We hope that they will. That's why we spread thoughts of goodwill every day, thinking, may all beings be happy, primarily so that we can keep watch over our own actions, and then realizing that to whatever extent we can help others, we're happy to help. But it has to start here. If you're going to tell people the right way to cook an egg, maybe it's good first to know how to cook an egg yourself, so everything keeps coming back to your actions, right here, right now, right here, right now, when the Buddha was talking about the evolution of the world, the devolution of the world. In other words, how society develops and then how it declines. He kept saying that it all comes from the actions of beings. Our interconnected actions are what create the world at large. But then, the world of your experience is the result of your actions in an area that you don't share with anybody else. You know that old question about whether the way you see blue looks the same way as other people see blue. You don't know, and there's no way you could ever know. Now, blue's not a real issue, but pain is. The pain you feel, nobody else can feel for you. They can see the signs that you have pain, and they can sympathize with you, but they can't really feel your pain. So when the Buddha says to focus on the issue of why you're suffering, he's saying to focus on this area of your awareness, the area that you don't share with anyone else. And look in here as well for the cause of the suffering, and also for the solution. In other words, it's not the case that we suffer because of things outside. There can be bad things outside, but we don't have to suffer from them. We suffer from them because of our own lack of skill, our own lack of understanding. So the cause is inside, but the solution can also be found inside in the qualities you develop: virtue, concentration, and discernment, based on a foundation of generosity and goodwill. Right here is where the real work has to be done. And when the work is done here, to the point where you have something solid inside, then you can share. Up to that point, you really have to work on, as Ajaan Suwat would say, getting yourself. He would often comment, as we were getting the monastery started, we're not here to get anybody else, we're here to get ourselves. And by that, he meant, we're not going to go out of our way to make things attractive, or to change things, to change the Dharma, or change the Vinaya, in order to appeal to people, to get them to come. We use the Dharma, we use the Vinaya to practice. And if anyone else wants to practice that way, we're happy to have them come. But there's no need to go running out and trying to get people to come in. As he said, it's not that he couldn't think of ways of attracting people to the monastery, but every time he did, if it had nothing to do with the Dhamma and the Vinaya, he felt ashamed. He would think of Ajaan Mun, of what Ajaan Mun might think. But look at what we've got as a result. We've got a monastery that's grown. He died 15 years ago, as of today, but the monastery is still going. So even though he was looking after himself, we're benefiting from that. That's how real helpfulness in the Dhamma happens. By looking after your own thoughts, words and deeds, and specifically by looking after your mind. That's how the Dhamma is spread. In other words, it's spread by actual actions, not just by words. There was a piece recently about how Buddhists ought to get off of their cushion and get out there in the world and deal with the real causes of suffering, which are rooted in society. But the author was totally missing the point. The real causes are in here. The Buddha himself saw that you could change the world, but it would never be enough for people. As he said, even if it rained gold coins, it wouldn't be enough for one person's sensual desires. So the pursuit of an ideal or a perfect world out there is never ending. And a lot of people, in creating a perfect world, can create a lot of messes and harm for other people. The word for perfection that they use in the canon applies to qualities you develop in the mind. That's where perfection can be found. The world is always going to be imperfect, but there is such a thing as perfect happiness, and it doesn't harm anyone. It doesn't place any burdens on anyone at all. The Buddha gives us that test for what counts as Dhamma. First, in terms of the goal, It has to release the mind from fetters and from passion. In other words, to induce dispassion. Second, there are the things you do to attain that goal. You have to learn how to be content with getting just your basic needs met. You have to learn how to shed all of your unhealthy conceit, unhealthy pride, any thoughts of getting back at other people, and you have to put forth effort. Third, you also have to think about how your practice has an effect on other people. You want to stay unentangled, unburdensome. That's how you test the Dharma, by seeing its impact in these three areas. The true Dharma is a Dhamma that makes you self-reliant and makes you less of a burden on other people. But the purpose here is really to get out. You might say the Buddha was an escapist, but he was escapist in the best sense of the word. He saw all the dangers that we create for ourselves and for other people by staying in the system. As he said, this is a system where eating is built into it. And so you want to look for the escape. And in finding it, you leave a trail behind for other people. So try to look after yourself in the best sense of the word, with wisdom and discernment, compassion, and all the other good qualities that are required to really look after yourself properly. Ajaan Suwat gave us an example, and let's hope that we can be an example to others.